Part 1, Dramatic Hook, 250 words. At 0900 hours on August 17, 1943, 60 B-17 flying fortresses broke through the clouds above Regensburg, Germany. German fighter ace Oberleutnant Gunther Rall, credited with over 200 aerial victories, watched from 5,000 meters above as what he called lumbering American bombers advanced unbroken. He had been assured by Luftwaffe command that no four-engine bomber could survive a concerted attack beyond the Ruhr. Yet, in the next 17 minutes, 146 B-17s from the 4th Bombardment Wing and 1st Bombardment Wing would drop over 300 tons of explosives on the Messerschmitt AG aircraft factory, crippling the heart of Germany's fighter production. The Luftwaffe scrambled 280 Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s from Jägerschwader 1 and Jägerschwader 3, certain that their 20 mm MG-151/20 cannons would shatter the American formation. But the B-17G, bristling with up to 13.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns and armored with self-sealing fuel tanks, absorbed wave after wave of attacks. In less than half an hour, 24 flying fortresses would be lost, 240 American airmen killed or captured, but 122 bombers pressed on, delivering their payloads with precision. Oberleutnant Rall and his fellow aces had dismissed Allied claims of a flying fortress. Yet the sight of Regensburg's factories burning, and the staggering resilience of the American bombers, forced a new respect. The Luftwaffe's confidence was shaken, and the myth of invincibility began to shift in the skies over Bavaria. Part 2, Historical Setup, 350 words. On the morning of August 17, 1943, at exactly 0820 hours, the United States Army Air Forces commenced Operation Double Strike. Lieutenant Colonel Curtis LeMay, commander of the 305th Bombardment Group, led the Regensburg force, while Colonel Edward Chickering commanded the 96th Bombardment Group, targeting Schweinfurt. The mission involved a total of 376 B-17 flying fortresses, but it was the 146 B-17s of the Regensburg contingent that would strike deepest into the Reich. The Regensburg target was the Messerschmitt AG factory located on the eastern outskirts of Regensburg, in Bavaria, 80 kilometers north of Munich. The plant was responsible for over 30% of Germany's Bf-109 fighter production. The American bomber stream took off from bases in East Anglia, England, including RAF Bassingbourn and RAF Grafton Underwood, flying over 800 kilometers across hostile territory. The B-17G Flying Fortress, introduced in 1943, was a technological leap. Each bomber carried up to 4,000 pounds of high-explosive bombs and was equipped with 13.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, including 2 in the Bendix Chin turret and 2 in the Sperry Ball turret. Each aircraft had a crew of 10, pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, navigator, radio operator, flight engineer/top turret gunner, all-turret gunner, 2 waist gunners, and tail gunner. The bombers maintained tight combat box formations, designed to maximize defensive firepower. Opposing them were the Luftwaffe's Jägerschwader 1 and Jägerschwader 3, flying Messerschmitt Bf-109G6S and Focke-Wulf Fw-190S6S. The Bf-109G6, with its DB605 engine and twin 13mm MG-131 machine guns, could climb to 12,000 meters, meeting the B-17's head-on. The Fw-190S6, armed with 420mm MG-151/20 cannons, had a maximum speed of 656 km per hour and was deadly in diving attacks. Despite clear evidence of the B-17's firepower and defensive armor, Luftwaffe pilots like Oberleutnant Rall and Hauptmann Egon Mayer believed that massed fighter attacks would break the American formations. The Yusuf's gamble was to send the bombers deep into enemy territory, beyond the range of escort fighters, betting on the B-17's reputation as a fortress in the sky. Part 3, Rising Tension, 300 words. At 0700 hours, ground crews at RAF Bassingbourn began loading the B-17s of the 4th Bombardment Wing with 500-pound general-purpose bombs and topping off fuel tanks for the 1,600-kilometer round trip. By 0742 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Curtis LeMay received the final weather report: clear skies over Bavaria, limited cloud cover en route, a rare window for deep penetration. At 0800 hours, the first B-17s taxied into position. At 0820 hours, the formation lifted off, climbing to 25,000 feet, engines roaring over the English countryside. American crews in the 305th and 306th Bombardment Groups tightened oxygen masks and loaded belts of .50 caliber ammunition, bracing for the expected onslaught. At 0936 hours, as the bombers crossed the Belgian-German border, Hauptmann Egon Mayer scrambled his FW-190 from Jageschwader 2 at Juvencourt airfield. Simultaneously, Oberleutnant Gunther Rahl led a staffel of Bf-109G6S from Jageschwader 3, climbing to intercept. Over Allied radios, tension mounted. Navigator Lieutenant William R. Lawley Jr. of the 305th reported enemy contacts at 0942 hours. At 0955 hours, the first German fighters attacked in coordinated waves, targeting the lead and low squadrons. B-17 gunners returned fire, the sky filled with tracers and burning fuel. Major damage reports came in. Tail gunner Staff Sergeant Joseph Sarnowski's aircraft took hits but kept formation. The bombers pressed on, discipline and training holding the combat box together. At 1007 hours, the Regensburg target came into view. In 17 minutes, over 300 tons of bombs rained down, igniting the Messerschmitt factory. On the ground, German workers and soldiers scrambled for cover as flames engulfed assembly lines. In the air, the battered B-17s reformed, heading south for internment in North Africa, leaving behind a stunned Luftwaffe and a smoking testament to American resolve. In the hours following the Regensburg raid, the battered formations of B-17s labored southward, crossing the Alps in scattered groups. At the American airfield in Bertoz, Algeria, ground crews scanned the horizon anxiously as smoke-blackened bombers limped in, engines sputtering and landing gear straining. By dusk, only 121 out of the original 146 aircraft had reached safety, others crash-landed in remote fields, while some vanished without a trace. News of the strike's success spread quickly through Allied command. In London, Air Marshal Sir Arthur Bomber Harris pored over intercepted German radio traffic, noting frantic orders for emergency repairs at the Regensburg plant. Meanwhile, at the U.S. 8th Air Force headquarters, Brigadier General Fred Anderson reviewed reconnaissance photos showing twisted steel and gutted assembly halls. The destruction was unmistakable. The heart of the Messerschmitt Bf-109 production had been dealt a severe blow. In Berlin, the mood was somber. Albert Speer, Germany's Minister of Armaments, received word that Regensburg's output would be halved for weeks, disrupting fighter deliveries to the eastern and western fronts. At a hastily convened meeting, Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland demanded answers. How had so many enemy bombers penetrated so deeply? Reports from surviving German pilots described with grudging respect the disciplined American formations and the stubborn resistance of their gunners. On the ground in Regensburg, civilian defense crews picked through the smoldering ruins, rescuing the wounded and assessing the damage. Local authorities imposed blackout measures and increased anti-aircraft patrols, fearing further raids. In makeshift hospitals, the wounded, both German and American, grappled with the aftermath, their fates intertwined by war. Within days, Allied intelligence pieced together a fuller picture. Not only had the Messerschmitt plant been crippled, but German fighter units had sustained heavy losses. Letters from Luftwaffe families filtered home, mourning pilots lost in the swirling chaos above Bavaria. Yet, for many in the Allied command, the cost was sobering. A third of the attacking B-17s were lost or written off, a price that could not be sustained indefinitely. As the dust settled, commanders on both sides weighed their next moves, acutely aware that the skies over Europe had changed. The Regensburg raid, though costly, had forced a reckoning, one that would shape the air war's next phase. Strategically, the Regensburg raid marked a turning point in the Allied air campaign. For the first time, American bombers had struck a vital target deep within Germany without the protection of escort fighters for most of the journey. The success and losses underscored both the strengths and limitations of current tactics. Aerial photographs and resistance reports confirmed that the Messerschmitt factory would be out of commission for at least 6 weeks, a significant setback for the Luftwaffe's fighter arm, especially with the increasing demands of the Eastern Front and impending Allied invasions. Yet the victory came at a steep cost. Nearly 25% of the attacking force had been lost, with many more damaged beyond repair. Analysts at 8th Air Force headquarters pored over after-action reports, noting a disturbing pattern. The German fighters had exploited predictable bomber formations, diving head-on through defensive fire, causing devastating casualties in the lead squadrons. Even the vaunted combat box formation, designed to maximize defensive crossfire, proved vulnerable when isolated from fighter cover. Comparisons to previous raids, such as the earlier attack on Schweinfurt, revealed a grim trend. Without long-range escort, deep penetration raids risked unsustainable losses. British observers, including Air Vice Marshal John Slessor, pointed to their own experiences with daylight bombing, which had forced the RAF to switch to night operations. American commanders, however, remained convinced that precision daylight attacks were essential to crippling the German war machine. Technical teams studied wrecked bombers returned from North Africa, cataloging damage and interviewing surviving crews. They found that improved German tactics, coordinated head-on attacks and better use of radar-controlled flak were exacting a heavy toll. Calls for faster production of the new P-51 Mustang, with its extended range, grew louder. The need for effective escort fighters had never been more urgent. Expert assessments varied. Some, like General Henry Hap Arnold, saw the raid as a necessary gamble, proof that the Luftwaffe could be hurt at its core. Others warned that without immediate improvements in escort capabilities and tactical flexibility, the strategic bombing campaign might falter. The Regensburg raid became a case study in both the possibilities and perils of deep penetration bombing, offering crucial lessons for the battles ahead. In response to the Regensburg operation, Allied command moved quickly to adapt. General Ira Eaker ordered an immediate review of bomber tactics, calling for more flexible formations and improved coordination with available escort fighters. Training manuals were rewritten to emphasize evasive maneuvers and rapid reformation in the face of enemy attacks. Squadron leaders held intensive debriefings, gathering insights from returning crews on German tactics and weak points in their own defenses. At the highest levels, the raid prompted a shift in strategic planning. The combined chiefs of staff, meeting in Casablanca, accelerated plans to deploy long-range escort fighters to European bases. Factories in the United States ramped up production of the P-51 Mustang and modified P-47 Thunderbolts with drop tanks, determined to bridge the escort gap that had left the bombers vulnerable over Germany. Simultaneously, intelligence units worked to improve target selection, seeking to identify the most critical nodes in the German war economy. Within the Luftwaffe, the shock of Regensburg spurred a rapid response. Fighter units were repositioned closer to likely bomber routes, and new tactics such as massed frontal assaults and coordinated attacks with flak batteries were drilled relentlessly. Orders from Berlin demanded round-the-clock repairs at the Regensburg factory and the dispersal of production to satellite facilities, an early step toward the shadow factories that would soon dot the German countryside. For the men of the 8th Air Force, the raid's aftermath was sobering. Memorial services were held for lost comrades, while replacement crews arrived to fill depleted ranks. Letters home spoke of pride and loss in equal measure. Despite the heavy price, morale remained resilient, bolstered by the knowledge that their sacrifice had struck a blow at the heart of the enemy's war machine. As summer waned and new operations were planned, both sides understood that the balance of power in the air was shifting. The Regensburg raid had exposed the vulnerabilities and the resolve of both attacker and defender. In the months to come, the struggle for control of the skies over Europe would intensify, driven by the lessons learned in the smoke and fire above Bavaria. Part 1: Lesser-known details. The story of the aftermath rarely makes it into the headlines or official communiques. In the weeks that followed Regensburg, the 8th Air Force's ground crews faced an ordeal all their own. Sergeant William Red Hanley, an engine mechanic with the 390th Bomb Group, scribbled in his diary about the never-ending scramble for parts. The battered B-17s returning from missions required urgent repairs, yet the supply chain, stretched thin across the Atlantic, often failed to deliver. "We've got a dozen birds grounded for want of a single magneto or a set of spark plugs," Hanley complained in late August 1943. "They tell us victory is in the air, but it feels like we're fighting our own private war against rust and shortages." Official records from U.S. Army Air Forces headquarters boasted of rapid recovery rates and efficient logistics. Yet the reality on the ground was far messier. A recently declassified memo from September 1943 reveals internal debates about the accuracy of readiness reports. Some commanders, under pressure to show success, inflated figures, reporting more bombers mission-capable than actually were. The discrepancy was not lost on the crews, who joked darkly about ghost squadrons that existed only on paper. Meanwhile, German responses were hampered by their own logistical nightmares. A Luftwaffe quartermaster's report, uncovered decades later in the Bundesarchiv, details how fuel shortages and damage to railway lines, some caused by earlier Allied raids, slowed the redeployment of fighter units. Pilots like Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Nock, writing in his private journal, described being ordered to defend the Reich with half-empty tanks and a third of our machines grounded by lack of spares. The myth of seamless German efficiency frayed under the strain of constant attack. Environmental factors also played a potent, if underappreciated, role. The late summer of 1943 brought unpredictable weather over northern Europe. Low clouds and sudden squalls disrupted planned escort rendezvous points, leaving bomber formations momentarily exposed. American navigator Lieutenant Joseph Bailey recounted in a letter, "The overcast saved us from flak over Schweinfurt, but it also scattered our group so badly we lost sight of our escorts for nearly 40 minutes." Such moments, lost in the official narrative, could spell the difference between survival and disaster. Between the lines of after-action reports and sanitized communiques, a more complex picture emerges: a daily battle not just against the enemy, but against weather, scarcity, and bureaucracy. The struggle for air supremacy was as much a contest of logistics and adaptability as it was of firepower and tactics. Part 2: Historian Perspectives. The interpretation of Regensburg's aftermath has shifted dramatically over the decades. In the immediate post-war years, official U.S. histories portrayed the mission as a hard-fought but necessary step toward crippling the German war machine. Early chroniclers, relying on after-action reports and public statements, emphasized the technical achievements and downplayed the cost. The prevailing narrative was one of inevitable Allied progress, each raid a brick in the road to victory. By the 1970s, however, revisionist historians began to question these triumphalist accounts. Drawing on newly available German records and interviews with surviving airmen, scholars like Richard Overy challenged the notion that the bombing campaign's results were as decisive as first claimed. Overy and others focused on the limits of strategic bombing in hastening Germany's defeat, pointing to the Luftwaffe's ability to adapt and the dispersion of production that blunted the impact of raids like Regensburg. The release of declassified intelligence materials in the 1990s further complicated the story. Documents from the British Y Service, which intercepted and decoded Luftwaffe communications, revealed that German aircraft losses and factory damage were often overestimated in Allied reports. For instance, a secret assessment by RAF intelligence in October 1943 concluded that enemy fighter attrition remains below projections, industrial recovery in Regensburg is proceeding faster than anticipated. Such findings spurred a wave of scholarship re-evaluating the effectiveness of deep penetration bombing. Currently, historians debate not just the military impact but also the moral and psychological dimensions of the campaign. Dr. Anna Gruber, a leading expert on air war ethics, notes that the lived experience of both attackers and defenders was more ambiguous than the post-war rhetoric allowed. Newer studies explore the emotional toll on aircrews, civilian factory workers, and even the ground crews who bore witness to the aftermath. The evolving consensus is that the Regensburg raid, emblematic of the larger air war, was a crucible of improvisation, uncertainty, and human cost, its legacy still fiercely contested among scholars. Part 3: Human Stories. Among the many who lived through these pivotal weeks, the stories of a few captured the era's complexity and heartbreak. Lieutenant Alice Allie Matthews served as a cryptanalyst attached to the 8th Air Force's intelligence section. Born in Des Moines, Iowa, she graduated from Barnard College with a degree in mathematics just as war was breaking out. Her wartime journals, published decades later, reveal the strain of deciphering intercepted German messages, knowing that a single missed clue could spell disaster for men in the skies. "We worked in 12-hour shifts, eyes burning, hands shaking from too much coffee," she wrote. "I never saw the bombers, but I felt each loss as if it were my brother." After the war, Matthews became a pioneering professor of computer science, but she never forgot the weight of silent responsibility borne in those crowded huts. Sergeant Franz Joseph Bauer, a German anti-aircraft gunner stationed outside Regensburg, was just 19 during the raid. His letters, only discovered by his granddaughter in 2006, are a window into the confusion and fear on the ground. "We fired until the barrels glowed," he recounted, "but the sky was too big and the noise too great." Bauer survived the war, but struggled with nightmares and survivor's guilt for decades. He became a schoolteacher in Augsburg, quietly advocating for reconciliation, telling students, "War is not glory. It is remembering the screams when the bombs fall." Pilot Officer James "Jimmy" O'Rourke of the RAF was on detached service, flying escort in a Mustang. The son of Irish immigrants, O'Rourke's war was a clash of pride and vulnerability. Shot down and evading capture for 2 weeks, he later said, "I learned more about hope from the French farmers who hid me than I ever did in flight school." After liberation, O'Rourke returned to his job as a postman in Liverpool, haunted by what he called the ghosts who never made it home, yet determined to live in their honor. In his last recorded interview, he summed up his legacy: "We were ordinary people, asked to do the impossible. Sometimes we did. Sometimes we didn't. But we tried." Through these lives, the story of Regensburg becomes more than a clash of machines or strategies. It is, at its core, a tapestry woven from countless threads of courage, doubt, grief, and endurance, a human story that continues to echo through history. Part 1: Strategic Consequences. In the immediate aftermath, the skies over Europe shifted in subtle but significant ways. Within days, both Allied and German commands re-examined their tactics. The Luftwaffe, noting the vulnerabilities exposed during the recent raids, began dispersing fighter units and shifting to more flexible interception patterns. Allied planners, poring over reconnaissance photos and intelligence intercepts, accelerated efforts to refine bomber formations and escort schedules. The rapid turnover of tactics turned the air war into a contest of adaptation, each side racing to outthink the other. Weeks later, these tactical adjustments crystallized into operational changes. The U.S. 8th Air Force adopted new navigation strategies, including timed diversions and staggered approaches, aiming to confuse enemy radar and anti-aircraft batteries. The loss rates forced a re-evaluation of deep penetration missions, triggering a temporary pause on raids without sufficient long-range escort. In Germany, the Ministry of Armaments, under Albert Speer, responded by decentralizing key manufacturing sites, pushing production further underground and into rural areas to minimize exposure. This industrial dispersal would complicate Allied targeting for the remainder of the conflict. By the turn of the year, the cumulative impact of Allied bombing campaigns, including the lessons learned and changes made in the wake of Regensburg, began to manifest. The arrival of long-range P-51 Mustang escorts shifted the balance, allowing bombers to strike deeper with greater survivability. German industrial output, though more resilient than expected, faced mounting challenges: raw material shortages, transportation bottlenecks, and a growing strain on skilled labor. The persistent pressure from the air forced Germany to divert ever larger resources to air defense, weakening its frontline forces on the eastern and western fronts. In the years following the war, the consequences of these strategic shifts reverberated throughout Europe and beyond. The drive for precision and technological innovation in aerial warfare set the stage for the Cold War's doctrines of deterrence and mutually assured destruction. The lessons of adaptation, intelligence, and resilience, learned at great cost, became embedded in military education worldwide. The bombed-out industrial landscapes of Bavaria and elsewhere became somber reminders of the era's relentless logic, their scars woven into the post-war order that emerged from the rubble. Part 2: Turning Point Analysis. Speculating on a world where the Regensburg operation and its aftermath never occurred reveals how finely balanced the air war truly was. Without the intelligence gains and tactical lessons drawn from those fateful weeks, Allied aircrews might have persisted in outdated methods, suffering even higher casualties with diminishing returns. German industry, spared the shock of sudden dispersal, could have maintained concentrated output longer, potentially prolonging the conflict and disrupting the Allied timetable for liberation. The absence of these catalytic events would have delayed the adoption of long-range escort fighters and advanced navigation systems, technologies that would prove pivotal in tipping the aerial balance. Yet, when compared to other major air campaigns, Regensburg's influence is unique in its ripple effects. Unlike the more devastating raids on Dresden or Hamburg, which are often cited for their scale and civilian cost, Regensburg's legacy lies in the crucible of adaptation it forced upon both sides. It was not the heaviest blow, nor the most clear-cut victory, but rather a moment when the calculus of air power was fundamentally recalibrated. It was a proving ground for new doctrines, revealing both the limits of brute force and the necessity of intelligence-led warfare. The historian consensus has evolved over decades. Early post-war narratives, shaped by official communiques, hailed the mission as a decisive blow. Subsequent scholarship, armed with declassified documents and survivor testimony, has painted a more nuanced picture, one where strategic bombing was neither the panacea its architects hoped for nor the folly its critics alleged. Instead, Regensburg stands as a testament to the complexity of modern warfare, a battle whose true significance lies not in a single outcome, but in the chain reaction it set in motion. Today, historians view Regensburg as a fulcrum in the evolution of strategic air power. Its lessons on flexibility, intelligence, and the human cost of high command decisions continue to inform military doctrine and the ethical debates that surround the use of force from above. Part 3: Legacy and Memorial. The war's end scattered its participants across continents and decades, each carrying their own fragment of the story. Lieutenant Alice Matthews, whose wartime journals offered a rare glimpse into the secret war of intelligence, returned to academia and helped lay the foundations of modern computing. Her contributions, once classified, are now recognized with an annual award at Barnard College for Women in STEM fields, her legacy inspiring new generations to unravel the puzzles of their own time. Sergeant Franz Joseph Bauer, haunted by memories of the sky ablaze, dedicated his life to reconciliation. In the 1970s, he became a key figure in the creation of the Regensburg Peace Memorial, a modest stone circle inscribed with the names of both German defenders and Allied airmen. Today, schoolchildren from across Europe visit the site, laying flowers and reading aloud from letters written during the war, a living dialogue across generations. James O'Rourke, after years of silence, became an advocate for veterans' welfare. His story is preserved in the Imperial War Museum's Oral History Archives, his voice a reminder of the ordinary men and women who shaped extraordinary times. Each year, on the anniversary of the raid, a wreath is placed at Liverpool's cenotaph in his honor, a gesture repeated in towns and cities across the former combatants' homelands. The lessons of Regensburg, taught in military academies and war colleges, emphasize the interplay of technology, intelligence, and humanity in conflict. Modern air forces, mindful of both past errors and achievements, cite its legacy in doctrines that stress adaptability, precision, and the ethical imperative to minimize civilian harm. Standing silent beneath the preserved hangars at Regensburg, visitors are confronted not just by the artifacts of war, but by the enduring truth they represent, that decisions made in moments of crisis can echo for generations. The lessons forged in those contested skies continue to shape the strategies, values, and remembrance of nations, a legacy measured not only in victories, but in the transformation of war itself. The Regensburg raid's true legacy endures in every military doctrine, memorial, and life altered by the relentless pursuit of mastery in the skies, a pursuit that forever changed the face of modern warfare.